Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest in our series of retrospectives. We are looking back over 11 incredible years on the air. Today, a very special edition. We are paying tribute to one of the most important aspects of our program, something that I am most proud of, our aftercare program. We created aftercare back in 1990 as a way of becoming or being socially responsible and answering our guests' cries for help. With the commitment and passion of our aftercare director, he's here with me, Jamie Huysman. It's always good to see you, partner.
Great to see you, too.
We were able to provide in excess of $4 million worth of treatment for our guests who needed help. This man has worked tirelessly. He has been awakened many, many times in the middle of the night to come to the aid of one of our guests in crisis. And, you know, I'm so glad that I have the chance publicly to say this, Jimmy, but it is with great honor that I have been associated with you. You are a very noble person. You know, a lot of people get involved in doing stuff for others to just bring notoriety and attention to themselves. That was never your motivation. I swear that it really has been a tremendous pleasure working with you over the years. You've helped people in a way that has brought honor to my program and to me, and I respect that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I mean, why'd you do it? Why'd you get involved?
Actually, I think that the way that the program began...
Mike, give me a hanky. I'm all teary. Good, good.
The way the program began here with the Geraldo show was purposeful. It started with you. I perceived you, and I think the rest of the viewing public perceives you as a victim's advocate. I think that aftercare is a victim's advocate program. The type of pain, the type of suffering that some of our guests have when they come on the show, they seemingly look to you more so than any other talk shows I've been involved with.
Why that, do you think?
I think that they see that somebody understands them, that somebody feels their plight, and somebody wants to do more than just show off their problem. I was inspired, I'm sure you were too, and many others, by the 60s and 70s. And Eldridge Cleaver, who recently passed away, unfortunately, had a saying that if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. And aftercare, with you, the Geraldo Rivera Show as a vehicle, grew into something that none of us had ever imagined.
The clip you're about to see, our first clip, is the one that really changed the face of talk television. It certainly changed the face of our program. It was the actual impetus for aftercare. It had all the makings of a made-for-television drama. Laura, the central figure in this real-life drama, was sexually abused, raped by her father. Even more hideously, she was actually living with her father as his wife. After appearing on the program, things changed radically for Laura. Her father, you know, we hated him, sure, but he was a very vulnerable guy. He got fired from his job as soon as he returned home. He vowed to kill Laura, saying that since they had been separated, if he couldn't have her, nobody could. Laura made one call for help that evening. It was to our show. We called Jamie to please get involved in this emergency situation, to get Laura out of harm's way, to help defuse this explosive situation. Today, Laura's married to a wonderful man. She has two beautiful kids. Jamie and I were proud to attend her wedding. I was especially proud to give her away. This show, the clip you're about to see, the first show where we could demonstrate how powerful a program like Aftercare really could be. Take a look. You know, as kind of the godfather to my staff and my far-flung family. You know, my father was one of 21 children. I got a million cousins everywhere. I get involved in lots of funerals and weddings and, you know, bar mitzvahs and first communions and all the rest of it. But I was especially proud to attend her wedding down in Florida. It really made me feel good. It made me feel that, you know, even when things seem hopeless, they're not necessarily, especially, you know, if you've got self-esteem or you have someone there who can help build it for you.
Laura, it was like a miracle for you to come down there and give her away. It was a symbol of what had happened in the past year. Everybody who thinks aftercare is a magic wand is kind of fooling themselves. What occurs behind the scenes is unbelievable. The night that she called back and spoke to Ray, Dan, Cindy, your producers at the time over 8 years ago, she was begging for help as a gun was placed to her head, and we were able to defuse that crisis. We put her into the same treatment center as her father, because if you remember that evening, it was impossible to separate the two. And then we sent the father the following day to another treatment center, the Retreat in Fort Lauderdale. She remained in the Manors. Then we sent him 2 weeks later to Dallas, Texas, to Charter Hospital for Sexual Perpetrators. The story continues. To this very day, Jim and Laura still really don't know where each other are at. And the case management has been extraordinarily difficult, but with boundaries clearly between the two. But Laura today does have a family. She has a new life. She's able to trust men again, which is absolutely incredible given what she's gone through. And it never would have occurred, I guess, if somebody one day said, you don't have money, you don't have insurance, but we can still help. And that's where the aftercare program really assisted her.
Good for Laura. Coming up next, a look at another dear friend of ours, Hambone. We are remembering aftercare. Stay tuned, back in a flash. I don't think I'll ever meet a man, or certainly never interview another guest like Hambone. I tell you, folks, I got a new appreciation of life through his eyes. He was a massive man, morbidly obese, from Tifton, Georgia. He had been a virtual prisoner, an actual, literal prisoner, in his own home due to his immense size and poor health. Now, we were finally able to extricate him, I mean literally extricate him from his house after 2 years using a crane and a bulldozer and get him to the hospital. He dropped 100 pounds, but, you know, that was a good sign. But then he went home and, you know, started on the same old rituals. You know, he used to eat an enormous amount of food. His mother loved him to death. But
To death is exactly the word.
Yeah.
The whole family loved him to death. And it wasn't their fault. It was the ritual. It was the culture. It was what they were about. Hambone hit everybody the same way he hit you. When we put him in the treatment center, Decatur Hospital in Georgia, he literally turned the whole treatment center around. It was a spirit and a vibration and something that he kept putting out in that treatment center that 6 months later, and he was in there for 6 months, that whole place had a different aura, a different feeling. I mean, that was the way Hambone was. And Tammy, his fiancée, would always be there, and she would always be there.
Normal size, sweet-looking lady.
Normal size. But, you know, Hambone really represented the most difficult case for this aftercare program in 8 years. First of all, he was a friend to all of us, and to lose a friend, we all can relate to that. It's impossibly tough to take on, especially if you were part of his care, because you always think you could have done a little bit more and just a little bit more. But Hambone had so many medical challenges, as the morbidly obese do, that it's often extraordinarily impossible to find hospitals around the country that'll accept the risk, if you will, to be able to treat somebody like Hambone. Because not so much the morbid obesity or the spiritual aspects or the clinical aspects, but what if the person has some medical issue that occurs? It's very difficult to open up a client like this in surgery without being able to close them up and be able to do that properly. So
We tried time and again to get Hambone the help he so desperately needed. Before we could get him into another hospital, once he went home from the first hospital, though, our pal suffered a heart attack, and Hambone passed away. He will remember Hambone. Take a look. You know, I was watching South Park, the hot new cartoon show. You know, it's on Comedy Central. It's a perverted show. It really, you know, it makes me wonder about the next generation coming up, but I guess it's like Mad Magazine was in my generation. But they have a Hambone-like character in it, and a Geraldo-like character, and it's, I guess it's funny, but it's not funny. The condition's not funny, and Hambone was a sweetheart. You know, it's just when your body just gets so out of control, it's very hard to fight your way back.
2 weeks before he was to go into the next treatment center, he passed away. He got a call from Richard Simmons, I think, a few days before, because you asked him to call, and we were all just around him, again, getting ready for the second move, and he was ready. Hambone was an interesting person. He actually ran a pawn shop out of his back window that nobody knew that.
I didn't know that.
Yes, the whole area. He was like a fabled person in this Tifton, Georgia area, and they would come to his window, and he would sell, and he would receive, and he would sell and receive, so leaving that business was difficult for him.
I wonder what he got for those Geraldo Rivera t-shirts.
I'm sure he did quite well.
What about Scott Sweat? He was another fellow who had the same problem. I remember we had a reunion bringing his whole family around. How did he do? How did he fare?
Scott was another person that, and I'm not sure if this goes with the condition or not, but Scott is the most amazing guy I've worked with, too, since Hambone. And he happens to be about 200 pounds less than Hambone, at about 750 pounds. Scott's 29 years old. He's a playboy. He loves convertible cars. He moves around as best as he possibly can, given the medical condition, and he's eternally grateful for everything that happens around him. He's a good friend to myself and to the program, but also we have a case manager, Laura George, that must talk with him every other night, also in Georgia, as a matter of fact, coincidentally. He's a good guy. He really is deserving of getting well, but since the show, he's had a few tragedies and setbacks.
Here's Scott. Take a look. Rogers Memorial Hospital for Scott, right?
That's it.
Medical Director Tom Holbrook, a special residential center dedicated to the treatment of eating disorders, 1-800-767-4411. Coming up next, saving the lives of people on the other end of the eating disorder spectrum, the anorexics. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. We are looking back over 11 great years. We're talking about the aspect of the program I am most proud of, our aftercare. Jamie Huysman, the aftercare director, he's gotten over $4 million worth of help for our guests who needed and deserved help. And those with anorexia certainly did. It is a disease that haunts us. At first, it just doesn't make sense. Why would anybody intentionally starve themselves? But we learned, as we learned a lot over the course of this decade plus, that anorexics are more than just women who want to be thin. When we first met Debbie and Kendra, for example, both of them fighting for their lives, both of them with a very distorted self-image, both of them painfully obsessed with horrible feelings of guilt. Take a look. How are they doing? How is Debbie and Kendra?
Well, Debbie and Kendra are a perfect example of how the aftercare program has worked.
Tell me.
In fact, not just Debbie and Kendra, but Scott and Hambone was an incredible good example, too. Through one person's pain and agony, another person seems to be inspired to get well. And that's how it works. So on television, we show the pain and agony. We hope and pray that the person is motivated enough to get resources if we can provide it to them. But sometimes it doesn't happen because there is no magic wand and it's the human condition. We can just all say we worked as hard as we could. But when Deborah was on the television set and actually obstinate, as anorexics often are. They are tremendously kind of controlling and they want to keep their life to themselves. Kendra was watching from a TV set and was absolutely inspired by what she saw. And she saw a person very much like herself. She was 65 pounds. She couldn't lift her baby. And she was dying, basically, just like most eating disordered patients do. She had tubes in her. And she wrote a letter to the show. And the next thing you know, she was on the show. So even though Devorah, she was wonderful, and we got her treatment, but she's still struggling today. Kendra took the lead and said, I'm going to get well, and she has, and she's gone from program to program just to do that.
That's great. You know, before I leave the eating disorders, you mentioned Richard Simmons before. I said a lot of nice things about you, Jamie, at the top of the program, all of which I absolutely meant. I also want to say those same things about Richard Simmons. He's a celebrity, and he's got a million things that make him a ton of money, but he is also a very sincere man who made a lot of phone calls in the middle of the night to some of these morbidly obese people. He didn't have to do that. He wasn't making any money, not even getting any publicity for it.
No, that's true.
So really, I want to thank Richard
We
Simmons.
talked to Richard constantly, from car phones, from telephones, and he was there.
He's a great guy. Coming up, a model who realized that heroin was anything but glamorous. Stay tuned. I can make myself physically ill when I think of how many junkies that I have met during my 3 decades in the news business. And the frustration that I have felt at times has been simply overwhelming because, I mean, you can try to high heaven, but in the vast majority of cases, once an addict, always an addict. I don't mean to be pessimistic. Once you get hooked on junk, I'm not talking about the reefer smoker. I'm just talking, I mean, once you get hooked on this junk, it is incredibly difficult to save yourself, and really you have to save yourself with a lot of help from your friends. In the clip you're about to see from a show called Heroin Alert, you'll see a young woman so desperately strung out, so in need of a fix, that we weren't sure that she would even make it on the program, much less survive in her life. And then she met Jamie. Her name is Stephanie. Take a look. So how's Stephanie? Is she doing okay?
Stephanie's is an incredible representative of the aftercare program. I really don't know exactly how guests are going to do. We gauge their motivation when they come off the show, and I know when all the audience is here and the lights are above and everybody really wants them to do well and they want to do well, bingo, that's something to work with. But somehow when everything goes down, it's a different story. And Stephanie, you know, had some resistance and some problems initially, and then said, yes, help me, which was a really neat thing to do. And we sent her to High Point in Miami, Florida, which is a treatment center there. And she did very, very well. However, she needed a little bit more, and that was the neat part. Aftercare doesn't quite just say there's a 28-day magic wand, because there really isn't. You're right, once an addict, always an addict, and that's what they need to remember. So we sent her then to a residential house for women, and it was called the Deauville House, and it was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where she did very well. She was actually discharged for a few days, but came back with incredible insight, and today she's doing quite well down in South Florida.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's almost a shocking contrast, Stephanie to Kiki. Remember Kiki?
Kiki.
Well,
Kiki.
here, let me tell you about Kiki. A heroin and crystal meth user, lived in California. I mean, she was so deep into the disease that it was profound. And when we met her, it was in the late stages. And she claimed to be in treatment countless times. She refused to listen to the aftercare recommendations. She thought detoxification would be too painful for her. The only way she'd go into treatment was if she stayed in a 1 or 2 day detox center. Jamie was totally against it, a 2 day detox. Just before she was supposed to enter a real treatment center, she convinced the hospital to discharge her home. Approximately 3 weeks later, Kiki was dead. Here's a clip. So you see, I'm not giving him the unvarnished, the varnished version. This is the unvarnished truth here, the good with the bad. Kiki was a failure, I guess you have to say.
Aftercare is here not just for the guest on the stage, but for the viewer that's looking at home. I think it's great that we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. I don't think that we can give that magic wand to any of the diseases and addictions we're dealing with because they're so hard, such a struggle. Actually, Kiki and I, and it's odd, I'm married and have a very, very supportive wife. However, Kiki and I, at 3, 4 in the morning, 3,000 miles away from each other, would be sitting and talking. And she would be quite high, and she would be really, really falling asleep. And I would be wondering if she was going to die that night, or if I would get into her treatment quick enough. And yes, I was against the 2-day detox, the naltrexone detox, not because necessarily of the modality, but I was really against it because I felt that she would think, I did it, it's enough, I can go home now. And that's exactly what she did. She went home. She really didn't have the practice skills to deal with her disease, and within 3 weeks she was dead in her bed, and it took us all back. And it's against all of our judgment that we did some of the things, but we said we had to begin somewhere with her. We knew she was going to be dead if we didn't do something.
She was so forceful about that. She swore up and down that if she had that 2-day detox, some miracle would happen. Poor thing, I miss her. I remember we met her mom.
Absolutely. And her mom was extraordinarily grateful, and we could only find 3 programs like that in the country. And that's one of the reasons it took a little bit longer, and I was hanging on to her day in and day out. But we finally did get her there, and it was actually in South Florida.
Win some, lose some.
Absolutely.
Coming up, a teenager so desperate that she had to kill her own father after years of rape and abuse. Stay tuned. Our next guest, who we put into aftercare, Jamie Jo, is the young lady I mentioned who killed her father after years of rape and abuse. She came to us with an incredible, hair-raising, hideous life story. We knew we had to help this young lady, and how did we?
Well, Rebecca, our lead case manager, has been really close to this case. How do you help a child that's just killed her father as he was sleeping there? It's a hideous thought, but we needed to peel the onion a layer at a time. We got Jamie Jo, we got her attorney, we started working with a therapist in Nashville, Tennessee, and we were able to get her into the Nashville Rape and Trauma Center, which is an outpatient program because she really wasn't appropriate for inpatient. She's been quite good there. They've just stepped her down to twice a month, and she seemingly is completing her GED right now. She got a promotion in her job. And the interesting thing for you and the viewers to know is that, you know, she had a murder rap against her, and she pleaded out of manslaughter. That should tell you how heinous the man she shot really was, because she's got probation now, and we're hoping she grabs her life and empowers it and goes on with it.
Here's Jamie Jo. Another tormented teen who came our way was young Ryan, a 14-year-old drug abuser who was in and out of trouble almost his whole life. He claimed to have been using drugs, for example, since the age of 6 and a half. He was a time bomb with the potential to kill. Here's Ryan. So how'd he do, Ryan?
At that show, if you remember it, you had a whole stage full of kids who have killed somebody by the age of 15 years old.
Okay, yes.
Ryan was probably the only person who hadn't done that. But, you know, when we tried to intervene on Ryan at the stage on that day, I mean, he looked at me and I think you bleeped it out, but he basically told me where to go. But kids are like that. You know, Jamie, Joe, Ryan, other kids that we've worked with through the 7 years we have a great persona to keep everybody away from them, to make sure nobody comes near them. They're angry, they're hostile, they're purple hair mohawks, they got hoops in their noses, please stay away. But when you start peeling Ryan away, and I got him into treatment at National Recovery Institute, somehow one day he hit his bottom, and children's bottom or kids' bottoms are usually death, so we got lucky, he was still alive. We put him in there. He became such a big-hearted kid. I related to him so well in recovery. I used to go visit him at the treatment center. And even to this day, I'd be available for him to help him. I mean, he's struggling. All kids struggle through kind of recovery because they got all the peers and kids throwing all this stuff at him. But, you know, he really did get a kind of a rocket launch from the Geraldo show. He really did come into a new way of life. And I think he's going to be something, a real force in society one day.
Ryan, if you're watching, good luck, man. We're with you.
Yeah.
Coming up next, a surrogate mom who decided that she couldn't give up the kid after all, the child that she bore. I'll tell you what happened when we return. Our next aftercare participant, Susan, was involved in a bizarre and notorious case in the New York area of surrogate parenting. It wasn't really surrogate parenting. I'll tell you what it was. She'd been paid off by a couple to bear a child for them, but she didn't, you know, she wasn't artificially inseminated. She actually slept with the man a bunch of times in a seedy motel, and he finally got her pregnant. And it was during her pregnancy that she changed her mind, decided to keep the baby. But once the baby was born, a judge declared that the father, the biological father, this man who had been screwing her in the motel, Joseph Kaplan by name, he had paid for, you know, her care and the birth, etc. He was the father. He got custody. He got custody of the child. The father got custody of the child. The couple who made the deal with Susan got the child. And obviously, this tore this young woman apart. Take a look. So how's Susan doing? Does she have visitation at least?
Actually, she does,
Oh,
Geraldo.
good.
She has weekend visitation, and I think she justly deserves it. She was vilified in the press. This entire story between the Kaplans and her was made out to make her absolutely the witch of the Hesperus. When I came to know her after the show, and you asked us to get help for her, I saw a whole different person. I saw a person that made real bad choices in her life. I mean, she really was making bad choices. Anytime you hang out to try to be a surrogate mother in a hotel with a man, obviously, you really don't have the skills you need for life.
Really?
So we started talking to her long and hard, and she didn't really have any psychiatric ailments. She didn't have a problem around some sort of primary diagnosis, but what she did have was a problem with practice skills, codependency, how to live life. And we got her into a treatment center in Nashville. Actually, it wasn't a treatment center. It was called Oakwood, and it was just to teach her skills around life. When she came out, and in your update show, I'm sure you'll see this, she was like a whole nother human. She started learning again, it's like being reborn again, and having the insight, which is all we want from treatments, connect the motivation to behavior the next time around. And she really got it. She really got it.
So she's okay now, relatively speaking?
Relatively speaking, Sue's doing very well.
It's always relatively speaking.
It is, it's always about relatives.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Final thoughts right after this. Stay tuned. A couple of quick points before we say goodbye today. First, I want to thank Jamie again for his dedication and his sincerity. For very, very little money, he has really worked tirelessly to help those of our guests who wanted help and who deserve help to get help. So again, partner, I really
Thank you, Geraldo.
thank you.
You know, actually, the feeling I have, the labor of love that this has all been, has been incredible. You've made an impact, and collectively we made an impact, I think, on all talk shows. Nobody's going to be able to show the problems now without showing the solution.
Nobody responsible, anyway.
Nobody responsible. The one thing that points in my mind is like bookends. The Laura case. Your company, Tribune and Investigative News Group, literally, in the middle of her treatment cycle, flew her back to Missouri so that she could file charges and take her life back. against her father. Now, I don't think any show could ever or would ever go to those lengths to allow somebody to get their life back. And Aftercare, to me, has been 7 years of giving lives back to people. And it's been done as a labor of love. Your producers, the people that work behind the scenes, yourself, Marty, Dan Weaver, everybody who started this program has really made it what it is. I have hundreds more we could update today, but you know what? I'm going to wait till your next daytime series.
Okay. And now you're going to be working with Lisa?
Yes.
The Lisa Gibbons show?
We're starting with the Lisa show as of this month, actually.
Oh, good luck. Okay.
Thank you very much.
My second point, which probably should have been my first point, I want to also thank the people who have had the courage to come up on this stage and bare their souls, because these people deserved whatever help they received. And that brings me to the point I just alluded to, my last point. That's about talk show ethics. When we started the Aftercare program back in 1990, and then when we amplified our commitment with the Talk Show Bill of Rights several years ago, we were making a statement that ordinary people who come on these shows should not have their lives exploited by producers hungry for ratings. The question I have right now for some of today's most popular talk shows is very simple. How many of your guests are better off because they trusted you and came on your show? If your answer is not very many, then shame on you. Jamie, again, thanks, bud.
Thank you, Geraldo.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
See you next time. Bye-bye.